continuous delivery versus continuous deployment. If you watched our segment on DevSecOps, you heard a lot of terms like continuous integration, continuous delivery, and maybe even continuous deployment. Even though all of them are part of the DevSecOps process, each have their own meaning and pros and cons. Understanding these differences is the first step in picking the right approach for your specific use case. Before getting into continuous delivery versus continuous deployment, let's take a step back and look at continuous integration. Continuous integration is a practice where developers merge their changes to the code base in your Git repository, your crown jewel, as often as possible. These changes are then built, tested, and scanned by your continuous integration pipeline, which builds and then runs automated tests and cyberscan against that build. Tests must include unit testing, integration testing, end-to-end testing, and regression testing as well. If these tests or scans don't pass, the changes are not merged to your main branch, and developers must fix those issues immediately and swarm to ensure the pipeline never breaks. This enables your teams to shift left and detect cyber and functionality or integration issues faster and prevents you from creating tremendous technology debt that will come back to haunt you. Now that we understand continuous integration, let's take a look at continuous delivery and continuous deployment. First, let's take a look at continuous delivery. Continuous delivery brings automation to deploy the code changes to a QA or staging environment, ideally following the GitOps principles. The final deployment to production often requires a manual action, a manual pipeline gate by an approved employee or set of employees. Continuous deployment instead takes the continuous delivery process all the way to production without human intervention. It's creating additional tests in staging, so it's not as scary as you think, because those gates are using different additional end-to-end testing capabilities, maybe even a hard-in-the-loop testing capabilities, and policy as code to ensure you're not breaking your production environment. Of course, you couldn't get there without the right testing maturity, metrics understanding, and deployment automation via canary releases and so on. So let's take a look at the benefits of each options between continuous delivery and continuous deployment. Continuous delivery enables you to do rapid deployment to production while enforcing additional checks. It's really better for teams that are less mature and ready to deploy to production environments seamlessly. It's also easier for teams that are deploying to classified or embedded systems that are disconnected from the development environment. You need to understand that until the manual production gate is passed, you're not really implementing DevOps. Deploying to a lab or to a staging environment is not DevOps. You must deploy to production to get the rapid feedback from your end user. So you're fooling yourself if you're just stopping at the staging stage and not deploying to production often. Now, when it comes to continuous deployment, it's a true instantiation of DevSecOps and following the GitOps principles. The software can be continuously pushed to production as often as needed, removing bottlenecks. It requires a higher level of maturity and additional testing in staging to make sure that you're not breaking your production environments, and you want to be leveraging your DORA metrics and live dashboards to ensure you're meeting your service level agreements and objectives. It's important to remember that DevOps doesn't mean you continuously deploy into some lab in a vacuum. Like I said before, the key is always to deploy in production with real end user feedback so you know what's working for them or not. You're not leveraging DevOps if you're not continuously deploying small incremental changes to production. A manual gate is acceptable, of course, but most teams should thrive to get the maturity to continuously deploying as soon as possible to production. Whether or not it's manual or not, doesn't matter, but it shouldn't take days or months or weeks to go from the lab staging to production. Following the GitOps principle, you don't want any drifts between your source of truth, your Git repo, and your production environment. Ensuring that your code is always in a releasable state is great to prevent massive technology debt. But not releasing to production can lead to unforeseen issues because your production stack needs to match your desired state in Git. If you're stuck in staging, effectively that's not the case. The real feedback you get is in production, whether using canary releases or A/B testing to mitigate the risk through rollback automatically and really paying attention to your metrics when it comes to your service level objectives. So let's take a look at a pretty simple example of a DevSecOps pipeline phases. First, you have the dev. That's the dev phase that then built, the build phase, the testing phase, the secure phase, and then staging, and finally the crown jewel, production. The real difference between continuous delivery and continuous deployment is that first, all of these are seamless here, all the way to here for both of them. No difference here. This is automated. You have a gate. Each have threshold here that you define for each value here, all the way to pass into staging. No difference between continuous delivery and continuous deployment there. With continuous delivery, here what you're going to see is a manual gate. This is going to be a manual approval either by one, multiple people to go to production. The difference with continuous deployment is that you're going to have here an automated process here. But keep in mind, you will add additional testing. So here what you're going to find is a lot of additional checks, right? So first we're going to do additional testing to make sure we can demonstrate that your staging is behaving the same way it should in production. And then you're also going to do a proper tracking of metrics so you can see based on your SLIs, you're going to see exactly, hey, am I meeting my requirements and am I seeing the same kind of capability and uptime that I would. Of course, you need to be able to emulate users and have a dual representation of your system there to know for sure that you're not going to have issues in production. Then, of course, once you pass these additional tests, the process automatically will push the change to production. And there as well, you would have the same enforcement and the same tracking of metrics so that you know that production is running the way it should. Maybe you deploy first with the canary release, slowly look at the metrics, look at your indicators of error, of rate and thresholds, and you see that you're passing all these requirements. And now automatically, thanks to these data gathering telemetry, you can now go to production. There you have it. Continuous delivery requires a manual gate to decide to push to production versus continuous deployment means that the final gate to release to production is automated with no human intervention thanks to more maturity in testing and staging and leveraging the right metrics to measure your recovery, failures, and service level objectives. Obviously, leveraging deployment capabilities such as canary releases allows you to deploy to a small footprint of your users first before scaling based on the feedback. Same for blue-green deployment or A/B testing. That effectively helps you mitigate failure, production issues, or customer frustration. Continuous deployment is not always possible for critical software, of course, particularly weapon systems in DoD, for example. But even us in DoD managed to automate the push to a JAP in the lab, including with classified and air gap constraint. So we ensure that we can conduct full hardware loop testing and really embrace the DevSecOps principles. So if the DoD could do it, so can you. Ruthless automation, ruthless learning, and investment in your people and culture. With your DevSecOps maturity, you will soon enough get there to embrace continuous deployment.